Hi, welcome back to Sadie's Spincraft. In this video we shall be spinning the merino and camel that was dyed the other day, and you shall be listening to chapters 19, 20 and 21 from Poison Study by Maria V. Schneider. Chapter 19. What would I have to do to get a piece of cheese? I asked. I knew it. Marg was the one leaking information about me, and now she wanted to use me. Finally, some evidence. I have a source that pays well for information. It's the perfect setup for a little rat, Marg said. What kind of information? Anything you might overhear while you're scurrying around the commander's office or Valek's apartment. My contact pays on a sliding scale. The juicier the news, the bigger the chunk of cheese. How does it work? My mind raced. Right now, it was her word against mine. I needed proof I could show Valek. To be able to finger both Marg and her source would be a sweet treat. You give me the information, she said, and I pass it along. I collect the money and give it to you, minus a 15% fee. And I'm supposed to believe that you'd stick to 15% cut of a total I'd be unaware of. She shrugged. It's either that or nothing. I'd think that a half-starved rat like you would pounce on any morsel, no matter how small. Marg began to walk away. What if we went to your source together? I shrugged. Then you'd still receive your fee. She stopped. Uncertainty creased her fleshy face. I'll have to check. She disappeared down the hallway. I lingered outside the baths for a while, considering the possibility of following Marg around for a couple of days, but dismissed the idea. If her contact didn't like my suggestion, I'd scamper to Marg with my tail between my legs, begging for another chance. She'd enjoy that. Then I'd follow her. Revealing her as a traitor to Valek would be a pleasure. My conversation with Marg had used up my bath time, so I headed to the commander's office. When I arrived, Sammy, Rand's kitchen boy, hovered outside the closed door, holding a tray of food. I could hear a muffled, angry voice inside. What's going on? I asked Sammy. They're arguing, he said. Who? The commander and Valek. I took the tray of cooling food from Sammy. No reason we both had to be there. Get going. I'm sure Rand needs you. Sammy smiled his relief and sprinted through the throne room. I'd seen the kitchen during dinner time. Servers and cooks swarmed like bees with Rand directing the chaos. Barking orders, he controlled his kitchen staff like the queen bee of the hive. Knowing the commander disliked cold food, I stood close to his door waiting for a break in the conversation. From my new position I could hear Valek clearly. Whatever possessed you to change your successor? Valek demanded. The commander's soft reply passed through the wooden door as an indecipherable murmur. In the 15 years I've known you, you've never reversed a decision. Valek's tone became more reasonable. This isn't a ploy to discover your successor. I just want to know why you changed your mind. Why now? The response wasn't to Valek's liking. With a sarcastic jab in his voice, he said, Always, sir. Valek jerked to open the door. I stumbled into the office. He wore a glacial expression. Only his eyes showed his fury.
They were pools of molten lava beneath an icy crust. "Yelena, where the hell have you been? The commander's waiting for his dinner." Not expecting an answer, Valak strode briskly through the throne room, advisors and soldiers melting from his path. Valak's anger seemed extreme. Everyone in Ixia knew that one of the 8 generals had been chosen as the commander's successor. In the typical paranoid custom of the commander's ruling, the name of the selected general was kept secret. Each general held an envelope that contained a piece of a puzzle. When the commander died, they would assemble the puzzle to reveal an encrypted message. A key would be required to decipher the note, a key only Valak held. The chosen general would then have the complete support of the military and the commander's staff. The theory behind the puzzle was that the secrecy would prevent someone from staging a rebellion in support of the chosen heir, since the heir was unknown. The added risk that the inheritor might be even worse than the commander was another deterrent. As far as I could see, a change in the chosen general probably wouldn't affect day-to-day life in Ixia. We didn't know who had been originally selected, so the switch would have no bearing until the commander died. I approached Commander Ambrose's desk. He read his reports, unaffected by Valak's rage. I performed a quick taste on his dinner. He thanked me for the food, then ignored me. On my way back to the baths, I wondered if the information I had just overheard would fetch a decent price from Marg's contact. I quenched my curiosity. I had no desire to commit treason for money. I just wanted to get out of my present situation alive, and knowing Valak, I had no doubt that he would discover any clandestine meetings with Marg. For that reason alone, I had to prove that no matter what Marg believed, I was not a spy. Just the mental vision of Valak's burning eyes focused on me sent a hot bolt of fear through me. A long soak in the bath eased my sore ribs. As it was still early in the evening, I thought it prudent to avoid Valak for a while. I stopped in the kitchen for a late dinner after helping myself to the leftover roast meat and a hunk of bread. I carried my plate to where Rand worked. He had an array of bowls, pots and ingredients messily spread out on his table. Dark smudges rimmed his bloodshot eyes, and his brown hair stuck straight out where he had run his wet hands through it. I found a stool and a clean corner on Rand's table and ate my dinner. "Did the commander send you?" Rand asked. "No, why?" "I finally received the Creolio recipe from Ving 2 days ago. I thought the commander might be wondering about it." "He hasn't said anything to me." 2 large shipments of Creolio and the recipe had arrived for the commander since Brazil had left the castle. Each time the commander had responded with a "thank you" and another request for the formula. As the quantity received had been plentiful, the commander had given Rand some Creolio to play with. Rand hadn't disappointed. He had melted it, mixed it into hot drinks, invented new desserts, chipped it and remoulded it into flowers and other edible decorations for cakes and pies. I watched Rand stir a mahogany-coloured batter with tight, agitated movements. "How's it going?" I asked. "Horrible. I have repeatedly followed this recipe, and all I've gotten is this awful tasting mud." Rand banged the spoon on the bowl's edge to knock off the pasty residue. "It won't even solidify." He handed me a sheet of once white paper smeared with brown stains and flour. "Maybe you can see what I'm doing wrong." I I studied the list of ingredients. It looks like a normal recipe, but I wasn't a cooking expert. Tasting, on the other hand, was becoming my forte. I took a scoop of his batter and slid it onto my tongue. A sickeningly sweet flavour invaded my mouth. The texture was smooth and the batter coated my tongue like Creolio, but it lacked the nutty, slightly bitter taste that balanced the sweetness. Maybe the recipe's wrong, I said, handing the sheet back to Rand. Put yourself in Ving's position. Commander Ambrose loves Creolio, and you hold the only copy of the recipe. Would you give it away, or would you use it to manipulate a transfer? Rand plopped wearily onto a stool. What do I do? If I can't make Creolio, the commander will probably reassign me. It'll be too much for my ego to stand. He attempted a weak smile. Tell the commander that the recipe's a fake. Blame Ving for your inability to duplicate the Creolio. Sighing, Rand rubbed his face in his hands. I can't handle this type of political pressure. He massaged his eyeballs with the tips of his long fingers. Right now, I'd kill for a cup of coffee. But I guess wine'll have to do. He rummaged around in the cabinet and produced a bottle of 2 glasses. Coffee? You're too young to remember, but before the takeover we imported this absolutely wonderful drink from Sitia. When the commander closed the border, we lost an endless list of luxury items. Of all those, I miss coffee the most. What about the black market? I asked. Rand laughed. It's probably available, but there's nowhere in the castle that I could make it without being discovered. I'll most likely regret asking you this, but why not? The smell. The coffee's rich and distinct aroma would give me away. The scent of brewing coffee can weave its way throughout the entire castle. I woke up to it every morning before the takeover. Rand sighed again. My mother's job was to grind the coffee beans and fill the pots with water. It's very similar to brewing tea, but the taste is far superior. I sat up straightening on my stool when I heard the word beans. What colour are coffee beans? Brown. Why? Just curious, I said in a calm tone, but excitement boiled within me. My mystery beans were brown, and Brazil was old enough to know about coffee. Maybe he missed the drink and planned to manufacture it. My efforts to ferment the pod's pulp had resulted in a thin chestnut-coloured liquid and tasted rotten. The purple seeds inside the pulp had been sopping wet and covered with flies. I had closed the window and dried the seeds on the windowsill. As they dried, the seeds turned to brown and looked and tasted like the beans from the caravan. Thrilled to link the pods with the beans, my excitement faded when I hadn't been able to learn anything further. Does coffee taste sweet? I asked. No, it's bitter. My mother used to add sugar and milk to half of her finished pots, but I liked mine plain. My beans were bitter. I couldn't sit still any longer. I had to find out if Valak remembered coffee. I felt uncomfortable asking Rand, unsure if Valak wanted him to know about the southern pods. After bidding farewell to Rand, who stared morosely into a failed batter as he drank his wine, I rushed back to Valak's suite. The sound of slamming books greeted my entrance. Valak stormed around the living room, kicking piles of books over. Grey rock debris littered the floor and clung to impact craters on the wall. He clenched a stone in each fist. I had wanted to discuss my coffee hypothesis with him, but decided to wait. Unfortunately, Valak spotted me. "What do you want?" he snarled. "Nothing," I mumbled and fled to my room. For 3 days, I endured Valak's temper. He vented his ill humour on me at every opportunity, thrusting the antidote at me, speaking curtly, if at all, and glaring whenever I entered a room. Weary of avoiding him and hiding in my room, I decided to approach him. He sat at his desk, his back to me. I may have discovered what those beans are. It was a weak opening, but what I really wanted to say was, "What the hell's the matter with you?" But I thought a soft approach much more prudent. He swiveled to face me. The energy of his anger had dissipated, replaced by a bone-chilling cold. "Really?" His voice lacked conviction. The fire in his eyes had extinguished. I stepped back. His indifference was more frightening than his anger. I swallowed, my mouth dry. "I was talking to Rand and he mentioned missing coffee. Do you remember coffee? A southern drink?" "Nope." "I think our beans might be coffee. If you don't know what coffee is, perhaps I should show them to Rand, if that's all right with you." I faltered. My suggestion had sounded like a child pleading for a sweet. "Go ahead, share your ideas with Rand. Yeah, buddy, yeah, best friend. You just like him." Icy sarcasm spiked Valak's words. I was stunned. "What?" "Do as you like. I don't care." Valak turned his back on me. I stumbled to my room and then locked the door with shaky fingers. Leaning against the wall, I replayed the last week in my mind to see if there had been some clue to Valak's withdrawal. I could remember nothing that stood out. We had barely said a word to each other, and I had believed his anger had been directed towards the commander. Until now. Maybe he had discovered my magic book. Perhaps he suspected I had some magical power. Fear replaced my confusion. Lying on my bed that night, I stared at the door. With every nerve tingling, I waited for Valak's attack. I knew I was overreacting, but I was unable to stop. I couldn't erase the way he had looked at me as if I was already dead. Dawn arrived and I moved through the day like a zombie. Valak ignored me. Even Janko's ever-present good mood couldn't snap me out of my funk. I waited a few days before bringing the beans along to show Rand. He was in better spirits. A big smile graced his face, and he greeted me with an offer of a cinnamon swirl. "I'm not hungry," I said. "You haven't eaten in days. What's the matter?" Rand asked. I dodged his question by asking about the Crelio. "Your plan worked. I informed the commander that Ving's recipe was wrong. He said he'd take care of it. Then he inquired about the kitchen staff. Were they working well? Did I need more help? I just stared at him because I felt like I was in the wrong room. I'm usually greeted with suspicion and dismissed with a threat." "That doesn't sound like a good relationship." Rand stacked a few bowls and straightened a few spoons. His smile faded. "My interaction with the commander and Valak could be considered rocky at best. Being rather young and rebellious, right after the takeover, I attempted every trick to sabotage possible. I served the commander sour milk, stale bread, rotten vegetables, and even raw meat. At that point, I was just looking to be a nuisance." He picked up a spoon and tapped it against his knee. It became a battle of wills. The commander was determined that I cook for him, and I was determined to either be arrested or be reassigned. Thump, thump, thump went the spoon. And Rand continued his story, his voice husky. Then Valak made my mother the food taster. That was before they implemented that damn code of behaviour. I couldn't bear to have her taste the garbage I served the commander. Old sorrows pulled at Rand's features. He twirled the spoon in circles between his fingers. Words failed me. Dread crept up my spine as I contemplated the fate of Rand's mother. After the inevitable happened, I tried to run away, but they caught me just shy of the southern border. Rand rubbed his left knee. They shattered my kneecap, hobbling me like some damn horse, threatened to do my other leg if I ran again. And here I am. He snorted, sweeping all the spoons off the table. They clattered onto the stone floor. Shows you how much I've changed. The commander's nice to me, and I'm happy. I used to dream of poisoning the bastard, of taking the final step in our battle, but I have this weakness of caring for the food taster. When Oskov died, I promised myself I'd never care again. Ram pulled out a bottle of wine, only I failed. Again. He returned to his rooms. I hunched over the table, regretting that my comment had caused Rand pain. My pockets bulged uncomfortably with the beans. I shifted in my seat. Liza would have good cause when she blamed this mood swing on me. Valak's actions with Rand's mother seemed harsh from Rand's perspective, but when I thought about it from Valak's point of view, it made sense. His job was to protect the commander. I lived the next 2 days in a fog. Events blurred together, tasting, training. Ari and Janko's curses and attempts to rouse me remained unsuccessful. The news that I could start knife defence failed to produce any enthusiasm. My body felt as wooden as the bow I held. When Marg materialised after one of my training sessions to inform me that a meeting with her contact had been scheduled for the following evening, it was with great difficulty that I summoned the strength to rally. I thought out each possible scenario, and each combination of events kept leading me to one conclusion. Who would believe me if I reported the meeting? No one. I needed a witness. So who could act as a protector? Ari's name sprang to mind, but I didn't want any suspicion to fall on him if something went wrong. It was also possible that Marg's contact had a boss, or a whole network of informers, and I could be getting in over my head. Dance as I might, there was but one course of action, and it led to but one person, Valak. I dreaded the encounter. My interaction with him had dwindled to the silent, awkward dispensing of my antidote every morning. But after tasting the commander's dinner, I sought Valak out, my stomach performing flips. His office was locked, so I tried his suite. He wasn't in the living room, but I heard a faint sound from upstairs. A thin slash of light glowed under the door to Valak's carving studio. A metallic grinding noise raised goosebumps on my flesh. I faltered at the entrance. This was probably the worst time to disturb him, but I was to meet Marg's contact the next day. I had no time to waste. Gathering courage, I knocked and opened the door without waiting for an answer. Valak's lantern flickered. He stopped grinding. The wheel spun in silence, reflecting pinpricks of light what whirled along the walls and ceiling. He asked, "What is it?" "I've had an offer Someone wants to pay me for information about the commander. He spun around. His face was half hidden in shadows, but it was as rigid as stone he held. Why tell me? I thought you might want to follow along. This might be the one who has been leaking information about me. He stared at me. I wished then that I held a heavy rock, because I had the sudden desire to bash it on his head. Espionage is illegal. You might want to make an arrest, or maybe even feed this leak some misinformation, spy stuff, remember? Or have you become bored with that too? Anger fueled my words. I took a deep breath to launch into an attack, but it slid unvoiced past my clenched teeth. There was a slight softening in Valek's face. Renewed interest emanated from him, as if he had been holding every muscle taut and had just relaxed. Who? He asked finally. And when? Marg approached me, and she mentioned a contact. We're meeting tomorrow night. I studied his expression. Was he surprised or hurt by Marg's treachery? I couldn't tell. Reading Valek's true mood was like trying to decipher a foreign language. All right, proceed as planned. I'll tail you to the rendezvous and see who we're dealing with. We'll start by feeding this contact some accurate information to make you look reliable. Perhaps the commander's changing successor would work. It's harmless information that will be made public anyway. Then we'll go from there. We outlined the details, even though I was placing my life in danger. I felt cheerful. I had my old Valek back. But for how long? I wondered as weariness crept in. When we were through, I turned to go. Yelena? I halted in the doorway, looking back over my shoulder. Once you said I wasn't ready to believe your reason for killing Rayad. I'll believe you now. But I'm not ready to tell you, I said, and left the room. Chapter 20. Damn Valek, damn him. Gave me the cold shoulder for 4 days and then expected me to trust him. I'd admitted to murder. They'd arrested me. They'd arrested the right person. That was all he should care about. Walking down the stairs in the darkness, I headed toward my room. I have to get out of this place, I thought with sudden intensity. The overwhelming desire to take off and damn the antidote was strong. Run away, run away, run away, sang in my mind. A familiar tune. I had heard it before when I was with Rayad. Memories I had thought were tightly locked away now threatened to push free, seeping through the cracks. Damn Valek. It was his fault I couldn't suppress my memories any longer. In my room, I locked the door. When I turned around, I spied Rayad's ghost lounging on my bed. The wound in his neck hung open, and blood stained his nightshirt black in the contrast. His blonde hair was combed in the latest style, his moustache groomed to perfection, and his light blue eyes glowed. Get out, I said. He was, I reminded myself, an intangible ghost and not, absolutely not, to be feared. What kind of greeting is that for an old friend? Rayad asked. He lifted a book of poisons off my nightstand and flipped through the pages. I stared at him in shock. He spoke in my mind. He held a book. A ghost, a ghost. I kept repeating. Rayad was unaffected and laughed. You're dead, I said. Aren't you supposed to be burning in eternal damnation? Rayad wasn't banished so easily. teacher's pet," he said, waving the book in the air. "If only you had worked this hard for me, everything would have been different." I like the way it turned out. Poisoned, pursued, and living with a psychopath. Not what I would consider the good life. Death has its perks. He sniffed. "I get to watch your miserable existence. You should have chosen the noose, Yelena. It would have saved you some time." "Get out," I said again, trying to ignore the touch of hysteria in my voice and the trickle of sweat down my back. "You do know you'll never get to sit here alive. You're a failure. Always were. Always will be. Face it. Accept it." Rayad rose from the bed. "You failed all our efforts to mould you. Do you remember? Remember when Daddy finally gave up on you? When he let me have you?" I remembered. It had been the week of the fire festival, and Rayad had been so preoccupied with General Tesso's visiting retinue, especially Tesso's daughter, Kana, that he hadn't bothered to check on me. Since I'd been meekly obeying his every command to gain some trust, he was smug in the assumption that he'd cowed me into submission. As a result, it was more than a month since he'd locked me into my tiny room that was next to his suite. But the festival had once again tempted me into disobeying Rayad's instructions to stay away. The beatings and humiliation of the year before were insufficient to deter me this year. In fact, I felt a stubborn pride in refusing to be intimidated by him. I was terrified of getting caught, knew deep down in a small corner of my mind that I would get caught, but I threw caution to fate. The fire festival was a part of me, then the only time I tasted true freedom. Even though it was for but a few moments, it was worth the consequences. My defiance added an edge to my acrobatic routines, making me bold and reckless. I sailed through the first 5 rounds with aplomb, dismounts steady, flips tight, energy level unlimited. I advanced to the final round of the competition, which was scheduled for the last day of the festival. I scrambled to put the finishing touches on my costume for the competition, while Rayad guided Kanya and a group of friends on a hunting party in the countryside. I had scrounged around the manor for the preceding 2 weeks to acquire the necessary supplies for my attire. Now I stitched scarlet feathers onto a black leotard and then outlined them with silver sequins. Wings tied to a harness completed the outfit, but I folded them small and flat so they wouldn't impede my motions. Braiding my hair into one long rope, I wound it tightly around my head and secured 2 flaming red feathers in the back. Pleased with the results, I arrived early at the acrobatic tent to practice. When the competition started, the tent bulged with people. The crowd's cheers soon dimmed to a dull roar in my ears as I performed my routines. The only sounds reaching me were the thump of my hands and feet on the trampoline, the creaking of the tightrope as I launched myself in midair to execute a 2.5 twist, and the crack of the slender rope when I landed on it without falling. The floor routine was my last event. I stood on the balls of my feet at the edge of the mat, breathing deeply. The heavy earthy smell of sweat and the dry scratch of chalk dust filled my lungs. This was my place. This was where I belonged. The air vibrated like a thunderstorm poised to blow in. Energized as lightning, I started my first tumbling run. I flew that night, spinning and diving through the air. My feet hardly touched the ground. My spirit soared. I felt like a bird performing aerial tricks for sheer delight. At the end of my last run, I grabbed my wings with both hands. Pulling them open, I raised them over my head as I somersaulted and landed on my feet. The bright scarlet fabric of the wings billowed out behind me. The crowd's thunderous cheers vibrated deep in my chest. My soul floated with crimson wings on the updraft of the audience's jubilant praise. I won the competition. Pure, uncomplicated joy consumed me, and I grinned for the first time in 2 years. Face muscles aching from smiling, I stood on the platform to receive the prize from the master of ceremonies. He settled a blood-red amulet shaped like flames and engraved with the year and event on my chest. It was the greatest moment of my entire life, followed by the worst, as I spotted Rayad and Kana watching me from the crowd. Kana was beaming, but Rayad's expression was hard and unforgiving as suppressed rage leaked from his twitching lips. I lingered inside the changing room until everyone had gone. There were 2 exits to the tent, but Rayad had positioned his guards at both. Knowing Rayad would take my amulet and destroy it, I buried it deep under the earthen floor of the room. As I expected, Rayad grabbed me as soon as I stepped from the tent. He dragged me back to the manor. General Brazil was consulted. He agreed that I would never be one of his group. Too independent, too stubborn, too willful, Brazil said, and gave me over to his son. No more experiments. I had failed. That night, Ray had just managed to control his temper until we were alone in his room. But once the door was closed and locked, he vented his full anger with his fists and feet. I wanted to kill you for disobeying me, Rayad's ghost said, as he glided across my room. I planned to savour it over a very long period of time, but you beat me to it. You must have had that knife tucked under my mattress for quite a while. He paused, creasing his brow in thought. I had stolen and hidden a knife under Rayad's bed a year before, after he had beaten me for practising. Why his bed? I had no real strategy, just a terrible foreboding that when I needed it, I would be in Rayad's room and not my small room next door. Dreaming of murder was easy. Committing it was another story. Even though I'd endured much pain that year, I hadn't crossed the threshold of sanity until that night. Did something set you off? The ghost asked. Or were you procrastinating like now, learning to fight? He chuckled. Imagine you fighting off an attacker. You wouldn't last against a direct assault. I should know. He floated before me, forcing the memories out. I flinched from him and from that night's recollection. Go away, I said to the spectre. Picking up the book of poisons, I stretched out on my bed, determined to ignore him. He faded slightly as I read, but brightened whenever I glanced his way. Was it my journal that set you off? Rayad asked, when my eyes lingered too long. No, the words sprang from my mouth. Surprising me, I had convinced myself that his journal had been the final straw after 2 years of torment. The painful memories flooded with a force that shook me and left me trembling. After I had regained consciousness from the beating, I'd found myself sprawled naked on Rayad's bed, Flourishing his journal before me, he ordered me to read it, taking pleasure in watching the growing horror on my face. His journal had listed every single grievance he had against me for the last 2 years I'd been with him. Even every time I disobeyed or annoyed him, he noted it, and then followed with a specific description of how he would punish me. Now that Brazil no longer needed me for his experiments, Rayad had no boundaries. His sadistic inclinations and overwhelming depth of imagination were written in full detail. As I struggled to breathe, my first thought was to find the knife and kill myself, but the blade was on the other side of the bed near the headboard. "We'll start with the punishment on page 1 tonight," Rayad purred with anticipation as he crossed to his toy chest, pulling from it chains and other implements of torture. I flipped back to the beginning with numb fingers. Page 1 recorded that I had failed to call him Sir the first time we met, and for lacking the proper deference, I would assume a submissive position on my hands and knees, and then be whipped. He would demand that I call him Sir. With each lash, I would respond with the words, "More, sir, please." During the following rape, I would address him as Sir and beg him to continue the punishment. His journal slipped from my paralysed hands. I flung myself over the bed, intent on finding the knife, but Rayad, thinking I was trying to escape, caught me. My struggles were useless as he forced me to my knees. With my face pressed into the rough stone floor, Rayad chained my hands behind my neck. The anticipation was more frightening than the actual event. In a sick way, it was a comfort because I knew what to expect, and when he stopped, I played my part, understanding that if I denied him his intended moves, I would only enrage him further. When the horror finally ceased, blood covered my back and coated the inside of my legs. I curled into a ball on the edge of Rayad's bed, my mind dead, my body throbbing. His fingers were inside me, where he would always be. He breathed into my ear as he laid beside me. This time the knife was within my reach. My thoughts lingered on suicide. Then Rayad said, "I guess I'll have to start a new journal." I did not respond. "We'll be training a new girl now that you've failed." He sat up and dug his fingers deeper into me. "Up on your knees, time for page 2. "No," I screamed. You won't." Fumbling for a frantic second, I pulled the knife out and sliced at his throat. A surface cut only, but he fell back on the bed in surprise. I leapt onto his chest, slashing deeper. The blade scraped bone, blood sprayed. A warm feeling of satisfaction settled over me when I realised I could no longer determine whose blood pooled between my thighs. "So that's what set you off? The fact that I was going to rape you again?" Rayad's ghost asked. "No, it was the thought of you torturing another girl from the orphanage." "Oh, yes, your friends." "My sisters," I corrected. "I killed you for them, but I should have done it for me." Anger surged through my body. I cornered him. My fist struck out, even though I knew in a tiny part of my mind that I couldn't hurt him. His smug expression never changed, but I punched again and again until the first rays of dawn touched Rayad's ghost. He vanished from sight. Sobbing, I sank to the floor. After a while, I became aware of my surroundings. My fists were bloodied from hitting the rough stone wall, I was exhausted and drained of all emotions, and I was late for breakfast. Damn Valak. Pay attention, Harry said. He jabbed me in the stomach with a wooden knife. You're dead. That's the 4th time today. What's the matter? Lack of sleep, I said. Sorry. Harry gestured me to the bench along the wall. We sat down and watched Marion and Janko, engaged in a friendly bow match on the far side of the storeroom. Janko's speed had overpowered Marion's skill, and she was on the retreat, backing into a corner. She's tall and thin, but she's not going to win, Janko sang. His words aimed to infuriate her, a tactic that had worked before. Too often, Marion's anger caused her to make critical mistakes. But this time, she remained calm. She planted the end of her bow between his feet, which trapped his weapon close to his body. Then she flipped over his head, landed behind him, and grabbed him around the neck until he conceded. My bleak mood improved a notch watching Marion use something I had taught her. The indignant expression on Janko's face was priceless. He insisted on a rematch. They launched into another rowdy duel. Harry and I remained on the bench. I think Harry sensed that I had no energy to continue our lesson. Something's wrong, he said in a quiet voice. What is it? I stopped, unsure of my answer. Should I tell him about Valak's cold shoulder and change of heart? Or about my night-long conversation with the ghost of the man I'd murdered? No, instead I asked him, do you think this is a waste of time? Rayad's words about procrastination had held a ring of truth. Perhaps the time I spent training was merely a subconscious ploy to avoid solving my real problems. If I thought this was a waste of time, I wouldn't be here. A trace of anger coloured Harry's voice. You need this, Yelena. Why? I might die before I even have a chance to use it. As I see it, you're already good at running and hiding. It took you a week to get up the nerve to talk to Marion, and if it was up to you, she'd still be calling you Puker. You need to learn to stand and fight for what you want. Harry fidgeted with the wooden knife, spinning it around his hand. You hover on the edges, ready to take off if something goes wrong. But when you can knock the bow from Janko's hands and sweep my feet from under me, you'll be empowered. He paused and then said, if you feel you need to spend your time on something else, then do it, in addition to your training. Then, the next time someone calls you Puker, you'll have the confidence to tell her to go to hell. I was amazed at Harry's assessment of me. I couldn't even say if I agreed or disagreed with him, but I did know he was right about my compulsion to do something else. He didn't know what it was, but I did. Find the antidote to butterfly's dust. Is that your idea of encouragement? I asked in a shaky voice. Yes, now quit looking for an excuse to stop training and trust me. What else do you need? The quiet intensity of Harry's voice caused a chill to ripple up my spine. Did he know what I was planning, or was he guessing? My intentions had always been to get the antidote and run to Sitia. Run away, run away, run away. Harry had been right about that. But running south would require me to be in top physical condition and to have the ability to defend myself from guards. However, I had been evading one important detail. Valak. He would follow me to Sitia and cross the border He would follow me to Sitia and crossing the border wouldn't make me safe from him. Even Iris's magic couldn't protect me. He would consider my recapture or my death a personal responsibility. And that was what I'd been so afraid to face, what I'd been dancing around. I'd been concentrating on training so I wouldn't have to deal with the dilemma I feared. I wasn't smart enough to solve. I had to enhance my strategy to include not only obtaining the antidote, but dealing with Valak without killing him. I doubted Ari had the solution. You might beat Valak with these blows, Janko puffed while blocking Marian's blows. He'll laugh him silly at how pathetically weak they are, giving you the perfect opening. He hates... Oh, hang on. Marian remained silent, but increasing the pace of her attack, Janko backed off. Janko's words stirred in my mind. An odd little long-shot plan began to take shape. Ari, can you teach me how to pick locks? He considered my words in silence. Finally, he said, Janko could. Janko? Ari smiled. He seems harmless and a happy-go-lucky, but as a boy he got into all kinds of mischief until he was trapped in a tight spot. Then he was given the choice of either joining the military or going to jail. Now he's a captain. His biggest advantage is that no one thinks he's serious, and that's exactly what he wants. I'll try and remember that the next time he's cracking jokes and my ribs. I watched Marian beat Janko a second time. Best 3 out of 5, my lady cannot deny, Janko called timelessly. Marian shrugged. If your ego can handle it, she replied, swiping at his feet with her bow. He jumped, avoiding her attack with an athletic grace, and lunged. The rhythmic crack of wood striking wood filled our practice room. Ari stood, assumed a defensive stance, and somehow I found the energy to face him. After the workout, the 4 of us were resting on the bench when Valak arrived. Marian shot to her feet as if she thought being found sitting idle was a crime, but the rest of us kept our relaxed positions. I found it fascinating to watch the small changes in Marian's behaviour whenever Valak was around. Her rough edge softened. She smiled more and tried to engage him in conversation or a match. Most of the time, he would review fighting tactics with her or conduct a practice, and she would preen like an alley cat, attracting the biggest tom. But this time, he wanted to talk to me, alone. The others left the room. Marian shot me a dark look with the force of one of her bow strikes. I would pay for this tomorrow, I thought. Valak paced. With an uneasy feeling, I hoped that he wasn't searching for a rock to throw. What's wrong? I asked him. Is it about tonight? Excitement over exposing Marg soured to nervousness when I thought of the risk I'd be taking. The idea that this might be another waste of time surfaced. Damn Rayad's ghost. He was making me doubt everything. The leak impacted my life. Someone had tipped off those goons at the fire festival, and Iris had known I was in the forest. Marg needed to be plugged. No, we're all set for tonight, Valak said. This is about the commander. He paused. What about him? Has he been meeting with anyone strange this week? Strange? Someone you don't know, or an advisor from another military district? Not that I've seen. Why? Valak paused again. I could see his mental wheels turning as he considered whether or not to trust me. Commander Ambrose has agreed to admit a Scythian delegation. That's bad? I asked, confused. He hates Southerners. They've requested a meeting with him every year since the takeover, and for the last 15 years the commander has replied with a single word. No. Now they're due to arrive in a week. Valec's pacing increased. Ever since you became the food taster and that Creelio showed up, the commander has been acting different. I couldn't put my finger on it before. It was just a nagging feeling. But now I have two particular incidents. The change in his successor and now the southern delegation. Exactly. I had no response. My experience with the commander had been the complete opposite of what I had expected from a military dictator. He considered other options, was firm, decisive, and fair. His power was obvious. Every command was instantaneously obeyed. He lived the Spartan life that he endorsed. There was no fear in his advisors and high-ranking officers, just an unflappable loyalty and immense respect. The only horror story since the takeover that I'd heard was about Rand's mother. Of course, the assassinations before were infamous. Valek stopped and took a deep breath. I've misdirected some Creelio to our suite. I want you to eat a piece whenever he does, but you're not to tell anyone, not even the commander. That's an order. Yes, sir, I replied automatically, but my mind reeled over his calling the suite ours. Did I hear that right? I wondered. Keep your meeting with Marg tonight. I'll be there. Should I tell Marg's contact about the southern delegation? No. Use the change of the commander's successor. It's already floating around as a rumour, so you'll just confirm it. Valek strode from the room. In case someone would discover our training room, I hid the practice weapons, removed all visible traces of our presence, and locked the door. On my way to the baths, my thoughts dwelled on the meeting tonight. Distracted, I walked by an open doorway, an oddity. In this section of the castle, most of the doors led to storerooms and were kept locked. Movement blurred to my left. Hands grabbed my arms and yanked me inside. The door slammed shut. Complete darkness descended. I was flung face first against a stone wall. The air in my lungs whooshed out from the impact. I turned, my back to the wall. I gasped for breath. Stay put, a male voice growled. I aimed a front kick toward the voice, but met air. Laughter taunted. A candle was uncovered, the weak yellow glow reflected off a long silver blade. Terrified, I traced the knife to the hand, then along the arm and up to the face. Nix. Chapter 21. Why? Nix placed the candle among the cobwebs lacing the tabletop. Why am I always the smartest one? He stepped closer. I kicked again, but he blocked it with ease. Why haven't my attempt to discourage you worked? In the flicker of the candlelight he moved, the edge of his knife pressed against my throat. Maybe I need to be more obvious. The smells of boiled cabbage and body odour permeated my nose, keeping my body still. I asked in the most neutral and unfrightened voice I could manage, "What's your problem?" "My problem is that no one sees you as a threat. But I'm smarter than Harry, Janko and Marion. I'm even smarter than Valek, aren't I?" When I failed to respond, Nix added pressure to the knife. "Aren't I?" A thin pain burned across my neck. "Yes," I replied. In the air, behind Nix, Rayad's ghost colossaled out of the dust motes, sporting a smug smile. "My boss wants you to stop training. I'm not allowed to kill you. Pity." Nix stroked my face with his free hand. "I'm here to warn you off." Parfait, why would he care? As I tried to distract him, my mind frantically shuffled through my brief sessions with Ari on knife defence. Damn, I thought, why hadn't I paid more attention? He doesn't care. The only thing dull-witted Parfait cares about is getting promoted, but General Brazil has a keen interest in your new hobby. Nix thrust his free hand between my legs and leaned his body against mine. For a terrified second, I froze. Panic erased all techniques of self-defense from my mind. A soft buzzing began to grow inside my head, but I stifled it, pushing it away, and it transformed into a simple musical scale of notes. Calm followed. The necessary defense moves appeared before my eyes. I moaned and rocked my hips, widening my stance. Nick smiled with delight. You're just the whore I thought you'd be. Now remember, you're to be punished. His upper thigh replaced his hand. He began to tug at my belt. I rubbed my knee between his legs, then rammed it straight into his groin. Grunting, Nix doubled over. I grabbed his blade with both hands to prevent it from biting further into my neck. Ari's practiced voice. Better to cut your hands than your neck, echoed in my head, even as I winced at the sharp pain. Focusing on the knife, I pushed the weapon from me. Nick stumbled back. Bitch, he snarled, and pulled his arm back to swing the knife. As the blade swept toward me, I stepped in close to his body, when I turned, my right shoulder brushed his chest. Using the edges of my open hands, I struck his upper and lower arm. The combined force of my strike and his swing made Nick's arm go limp. The weapon clattered to the floor. Grabbing his arm, I twisted it until the heel of his hand pointed up towards the ceiling. Then I pivoted, placing my right shoulder under his elbow. With all my might, I yanked his hand down. I heard a loud crack, followed by a scream as Nick's arm broke. Spinning around to face him, I punched him twice in the nose. Blood gushed out. While he was off balance, I kicked his kneecap, breaking it. Nick crumpled to the ground. I danced around him, kicking him in the ribs. My blood hummed and sizzled. His weak attempts to block me only fueled my frenzy. In that state of mind, I might have killed him. Rayad's ghost cheered me on. That's it, Yelena, he urged. Kill another man. It's the noose for sure. Somehow his words reached the rational part of my mind and I stopped. Breathing hard, Nix was still. I knelt beside him and felt for a pulse. A strong throb met my fingertips. The relief that coursed through me vanished when Nix clutched my elbow. I yelped and punched him in the face. His grip relaxed and I pulled my arm free. Snatching the knife from the floor, I took Janko's often repeated advice for self-defense. Hit and git. I ran, but this time fear didn't follow me. I ran with imaginary scarlet wings flowing behind me. Moving fast to ward off the shakes that threatened to overpower me, I reached the baths. They were empty at this time of day, so I hid Nick's knife under one of the towel tables. I checked the extent of my wounds in the mirror. The cut on my neck had stopped bleeding, but 2 deep gashes on my palms looked serious enough to require the medic's attention. There was also a wild, unrecognisable shine to my eyes, as if I had turned feral. I bared my teeth and thought, now who's the rat? Pondering my next move, I wavered. The commander expected me to taste his dinner, but I couldn't bleed all over his food. My initial surge of energy from the fight with Nix was waning. A wave of dizziness swelled. I headed towards the infirmary, hoping to reach it before I passed out. Medic Mummy gave me a quick appraisal. She pointed to an examining table. I perched on the edge and held my hands out for inspection. How? She started. Broken glass, I said. She nodded, lips pressed tight in thought. She nodded, lips pressed in tight in thought. Oh, lips pressed tight in thought. I don't know why I kept adding an in. Shh, sorry. I'll get my med kit. I stretched out on the bed when she returned with her metal tray full of instruments. A jar of Rand's glue seemed out of place among the medic's supplies, like a child's toy surrounded by adult paraphernalia. My hands had started to throb, and I dreaded the medic's ministrations. I turned my head in time to see Valak burst into the infirmary. Just what I needed, I thought, sighing. This had turned out to be one hell of a bad day. What happened? He demanded. I glanced at the medic. She took my right hand and began to clean my wound. Broken glass leaves jagged lacerations. These clean slices are obviously from a knife. I'm required to report it. The medic had reported me to Valak, and he wasn't going to leave without an answer. With resignation, I focused on him, hoping to distract myself from the pain in my hands. I was attacked. By who? His tone sharp. I cut my eyes to the medic, and Valak understood. Could you excuse us for a minute? He asked. She pursed her lips as if considering his request. Her authority overrode Valak's for all medical situations. 5 minutes, she ordered, and walked to her desk on the far side of the infirmary. Who? Nix, a guard in Parfait's unit. Said he worked for Brazil and warned me to stop training. I'll kill him. The intensity of Valak's voice shocked and alarmed me. No, you won't, I said, trying to sound firm. You'll use him. He's linked to Brazil. His hard blue eyes found mine and held my gaze, probing deep. Where did he attack you? A storeroom, about 4 or 5 doors up from our training room. He's probably long gone by now. I'll send someone to the barracks. He won't be there. Why not? Valak gave me a look that reminded me of the commander. His eyebrows were raised in an effort to suppress his emotions, inviting me to continue. If he's not in the storeroom, he won't have gotten far. You might want to send a couple of men. I see. Your training has been progressing to your satisfaction? Better than expected. Valak left the infirmary. Medic Mummy the stoolie returned to my side. Next time, I thought bitterly, I'll heal myself and avoid being betrayed by the medic. I still had a jar of Rand's glue in my backpack. How hard could it be to seal a couple of cuts? I chewed on my lower lip while she finished cleaning and sealing my cuts. Wrapping bandages tightly around my hands, she gave me instructions that would allow me to heal. No immersion in water for a day, no lifting or writing for a week, and that meant no training for a while, I thought. Valak's men entered. They dumped Nix onto another examining table. The medic shot me a quizzical expression. Then she bustled over to Nix's groaning form, giving me the perfect opportunity to leave. I hurried to the commander's office, but Valak had beaten me there. He closed the door behind him, and he joined me in the throne room. I've taken care of dinner, he said, guiding me back through the maze of desks. It was early evening, and only a handful of advisors were working. Find Marg and cancel tonight's meeting, then go back to our suite and get some rest, he said. Cancel? What for? It would look suspicious. I'll wear gloves to cover the bandages. It's cold enough now. It's a cold enough night. Nobody will notice. When he didn't reply, I added, I'm fine. He smiled. You should take a look at yourself in a mirror. He hesitated, his face creasing in indiscretion. All right, we'll proceed as planned. We stopped at the door to Valec's office. I have some work to finish. Rest and don't worry. I'll be close by tonight. He inserted his key. Valec? Yes. What'll happen to Nix? We'll patch him up, threaten him with years in the dungeon if he doesn't cooperate, and when he's done helping us, I'll reassign him to MD1. Good enough, or should I kill him? Military District 1 was the coldest, bleakest district in Ixia. The possibility of Nix falling prey to a snowcat brought a wicked grin to my face. No, reassignment's good. If I had wanted him dead, I would have done it myself. Valec straightened his spine, snapping me a look of a combination of surprise, amusement, and wariness over my comment flashed across his face before he reined in his emotions and once again was my stone-faced Valec. I smiled my best Janko impression and headed down the hall. Resting would have to wait, since I had a number of errands to run before the evening's meeting. First, I needed a pair of gloves and a cloak. As the cooling season dwindled towards the cold season, the nights had turned sharp and brisk, coating everything in a blanket of ice so that the blades of grass sparkled like diamonds when touched by the morning sun. Thanking fate that Delana was still in her sewing room, I chatted with her about the latest gossip before I had made my request. My goodness, she said, sounding like a worried matron. You don't have any clothes for the cold. She bustled about her stacks of uniforms. Her soft honey-coloured ringlets bounced with each movement. Why didn't you come to me sooner? She admonished. I laughed. I haven't needed them till now, Delana. Do you mother everyone in the castle? She stopped piling clothes and looked at me. No, dear, just the ones that need it. Thanks, I said in a tone of affectionate sarcasm. By the time she was through outfitting me for the cold season, I was inundated with a heap of clothes. With all of the flannel undergarments, wool socks and heavy boots, I probably would survive on the pack of ice for weeks. I stashed the pile into a corner of the room and asked Delana to have someone deliver them to Valec's suite. Still there? She asked with a grin. For now. But I think when things settle down, I'll be back in my old room. When I thought sourly, it was more like if. I selected a heavy black cloak from the stack, tucked black wool gloves into its deep pockets, and then draped it over my arm. The cloak had 2 hand-size red diamonds stitched on the left breast and an oversized hood whose function was more to keep the rain off my face than to keep my head warm. I think you'll be there a long time, Delana said. Why? I believe Valec's sweet on you. I've never seen him take such an interest in a food taster before. He usually trains them and leaves them alone. If there was any potential for trouble, he would assign one of his sneaks to spy on the taster, but he wouldn't bother with him personally, let alone live with one. Her face had the avid glow of a gossip at full stream. You're crazy, deluded. In fact, he's never taken an interest in a woman before. I was beginning to suspect he might prefer one of his male sneaks, but now, She paused dramatically. Now we have the lovely, intelligent Yelena to get Valak's cold heart pumping. You really should get out of your sewing room more. You need fresh air and a dose of reality, I said, knowing better than to believe a word Delana said, but unable to control the silly little grin on my face. Her sweet, melodious laughter followed me into the hallway. You know I'm right, she called. The only reason Valak was interested in me, I thought, as I walked through the dim corridors, was because I was a puzzle for him to solve. Once he thought he had all the answers about the Southern Magician and Brazil, I'd be sent back to my room in the servants' wing. I couldn't let myself believe anything else. It was one thing for me to have a harmless infatuation that wouldn't have any influence on my plans. It wouldn't. Absolutely not. To think he felt the same toward me would be disastrous. So I tried to convince myself that Delana, although a sweetheart, was a victim of her own overactive imagination and was mistaken. I tried very hard. I tried all the way to the kitchen. I tried when I saw Rand lurching around his ovens, reminding myself that Valak was ruthless, murdering dozens of people. The king's blood still adorned Valak's knife. Valak was deadly, moody, and exasperating, but for some reason I couldn't get that silly grin to go away no matter how hard I tried. Draping my cloak over a stool, I helped myself to a late dinner. Rand finished spinning his pigs and pulled up a stool beside me. My mouth watered at the smell of roasting pork. "What's the occasion?" I asked. Roast pork was a rare meal, requiring an entire day to cook and served only at special times. Generals coming to visit this week. All my special dishes have been requested. I've also been ordered to prepare a feast for next week. A feast? We haven't had one of those since... He shook his head, pursing his lips. Actually, we've never had one of those, with the commander in charge. Rand sighed. I won't have any time to experiment. Would you have time to look at these? Pulling a handful of mystery beans out of my pocket, I handed them to Rand. I had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to show him. I found them in an old storeroom and thought maybe they were your coffee beans. He immediately ducked his head and took a deep sniff of the beans. No, unfortunately not. I don't know what these are. Coffee beans are smooth and have a rounded shape. These are oval, see, and bumpy. Rand spread them out on the table and picked one up. He bit into it, chewing. He cringed at the bitter taste. I've never seen or tasted anything like this. Where did you find them? Somewhere in the castle's lower level. Oh well, I thought it had been worth a try. My disappointment pressed on my shoulders. I had hoped to solve this puzzle for Commander Ambrose, but it looked as though I had hit another dead end. Ram must have sensed my frustration. Important? He inquired. I nodded. Tell you what, he said, leave these here, and after the feast I'll work on them for you. Work? I'll try grinding, cooking, and boiling the beans. Ingredients can change their flavour and texture when you add heat, and these might turn into something I recognise. All right? I don't want to inconvenience you. Nonsense. I like a challenge. Besides, after the feast, it'll be back to my daily routine anyhow, and this will give me a project to look forward to. He funneled the beans into a jar and placed it high on a shelf of other strange edible similarly encased in their own glass jars. We discussed menu options for the feast until Rand needed to turn his pigs again. A quarter turn every hour, he said, reminding me that my time to meet Marg was fast approaching. A small pang of nervousness touched my stomach as I bade Rand good night. I stopped by the baths, intending to retrieve Nick's knife, but there was too many people there. Maybe being unarmed would be for the best, I told myself as I tried to calm the butterflies in my stomach. Maybe they would search me. If they found a weapon, I might be in more trouble. Marg wore her usual expression of distaste when I met her just past the south gate of the castle complex. We exchanged insults by way of greeting and continued to walk into Castletown in silence. I hoped Valak was close behind, but I knew better than to glance over my shoulder and make Marg wary. Stars decorated the night sky, and the full face of the moon shone brightly, casting shadows. The road to the town was grooved with ruts from wagon wheels and worn smooth by the passage of many boots. I took a deep breath of the cool night air and felt a sense of renewal as the heavy scent of earth and dried leaves cleared my lungs. Marg. At the outskirts of town, I saw neat rows of 4-story wooden buildings. I was struck by their symmetry. I had grown so accustomed to the wild, asymmetrical style of the castle, with its windows of every geometric shape, that the ordinary plainness of the town seemed bizarre. Even the placement of businesses among the residences had been planned in a logical manner. The few townspeople that I spotted on the street walked with a purpose. Nobody hung about, or talked, or looked as if they were out for a casual stroll. Nobody except the town's guards. Soldiers who had once played a major part in the takeover had been reassigned as policemen for the towns throughout the territory of Ixia, enforcing curfew and the dress code. They dealt justice in accordance with the code of behaviour by checking papers, arranging transfers and making arrests. Every visitor to each town was required to report to the main station to complete the proper paperwork before seeking lodging. Our meeting had been carefully scheduled to give us time to return to the castle before our presence on the street would be viewed with suspicion. The pairs of soldiers stationed on the streets followed us with their gaze. I felt my skin prickle under their scrutiny, and I had myself half convinced that they would swoop down on us at any moment. In the middle of a street free from guards, Marg came to a stop at a house indistinguishable from its neighbours. She knocked twice on the door. After a pause, the door swung inward and a tall, red-haired woman in an innkeeper's uniform poked her head out. Glancing at Marg, she nodded in recognition. She had a sharp, sloping nose which guided the movements of her head as she pointed her face at me. Her dark eyes rested upon me with an intensity that made me want to fidget. A bead of sweat trickled down my spine. Finally, she pulled her nose away to look down the street, sniffing for a trap. I guessed. Apparently satisfied, she opened the door wider and let us in. Still no one spoke as we proceeded up 3 flights of steps. The top floor of the house was ablaze with lights, and I squinted in the harsh brightness. A profusion of candles ringed the room on multiple levels, heating the air with the smoky scent of apples. I glanced at the window. With the amount of light in the room, I was sure it would spill out into the street, but black curtains covered the glass and pooled on the floor. Bookshelves and a desk, and a scattering of comfortable armchairs led me to believe that the room was used as a study. The woman who had let us in sat behind the desk. Odd metal statues that resembled lanterns with rings around the top graced each side. Other strange and gleaming objects had been artfully arranged on shelves and tabletops. Some even hung from the ceiling. These spun in the air, stirred by our passage. The sharp-nosed woman didn't offer us a seat, so Marg and I stood before her desk. Most of her ruby hair was confined in a bun, but small curly wisps had sprung free. "The food taster," she said with a satisfied curl to her lip. "I knew it was only a matter of time before I had you in my employ." "Who are you?" My bluntness informed her that I wouldn't tolerate games. "You can call me Captain Starr." I looked at her innkeeper's uniform. "I'm not part of Ambrose's military. I have my own." "Has Marg explained how I work?" "Yes." "Good. This will be a simple exchange. This isn't a social call. I don't want gossip or hearsay, and I don't inquire about my business. Or about me. All you need to know is my name. Agreed?" "Agreed." Since I wanted to gain her trust, I wasn't about to cause any trouble, at least not yet. "Good. What you got?" With her nose leading the way, she leaned forward in her chair. "The commander has changed his successor," I said. Star's body stilled as she absorbed this tidbit. I glanced at Marg, who looked shocked and annoyed that I had such interesting news. "How do you know?" Star asked. "I overheard the commander and Valak talking." "Ah, yes, Valak." Star tilted her nose at me. "Why are you living in his apartment? None of your business," I said with a firm tone. "So why should I trust you? Because Valak would kill me if he knew I was here. You know as well as I do how much is my information worth." Star opened a black velvet purse and pulled out one gold coin. She tossed the coin to me like a master would throw a bone to a dog. I snatched it from the air, suppressing a wince. The cuts on my hands started to throb. "Your 15%? She sent one silver and one copper coin flying at Marg, who knew Star's ways and caught them easily. "Anything else?" Star asked me. "Not at this time. When you have something for me, tell Marg. She'll arrange another meeting." Dismissed, I followed the silent Marg out of the house and down the street. Just as she guided me into a dark alley, Valak appeared out of the shadows. Before I could wonder why, he pulled me through a door and into a small room. I was surprised and confused by his sudden arrival. I had thought he would wait a while before arresting Marg. She had followed me into the room and stood with a sneering grin on her face. It was the closest expression to pleasure I had ever seen from her, and the opposite of what I had anticipated when she was caught as the leak. I tilted my head at Valak, hoping to prompt an explanation. "I was right, Valak. She sold the commander out for gold coin." "Check her pocket," Marg urged. "Actually, Yelena came to me before the meeting. She believed she was going to expose you," Valak said to Marg. Her gloating grin disappeared. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded. "No time." "Marg's not the leak?" I asked, still confused. "Nope. Marg works for me. We've been feeding Star some rather unique information and hoping to find out who her other clients are. Star's been pestering Marg to get you involved, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to test your loyalty." A complete understanding of Valak's ill temper snapped into my mind. He had expected me to betray him and the commander. How could he have believed that? I wondered. Didn't he know me at all? Anger, disappointment and relief warred in my heart. I was unable to propel any words past my throat. I had hoped to send this rat back to the dungeon where she belongs, Marg complained to Valak. Now she'll still be scurrying around. Still a threat. Annoyed, she poked my arm with a meaty finger. I moved in a heartbeat. I twisted her arm behind her back. She yelled as I raised her hand up high, forcing her to bend forward. I am not a rat, I said through clenched teeth. I've proved my loyalty. You will get off my back. No more nasty messages in the dust, no more prying into my things, or the next time I'll break your arm. I shoved her hard as I released my grip. She stumbled and landed on the ground in a heap. Pink-faced, she lurched to her feet as she opened her mouth to protest. Valak stopped her with a glance. Well said, Yelena. Marg, you're dismissed, Valak said. Marg's mouth snapped closed as she spun on her heel and left the room. She's not friendly, I said. Nope, that is precisely why I like her. He studied the door for a moment, then said, Yelena, I'm going to show you something. You're not going to like it, but I think it's important that you know. Oh yeah, enjoyed your test of faith. Sarcasm rendered my voice sharp. I warned you that I tested the food taster from time to time. Before I could reply, he stopped me. Be quiet and stay close behind me. He went back out into the alley. Keeping in the shadows, we walked back to Star's house, where Valak guided me into a dark entrance within sight of Star's door. The person who has been leaking information to Star is due to arrive soon, Valak whispered close to my ear. His lips lightly rubbed my cheek. Shivers ran down my spine at his touch, distracting me from what he had said. The impact of Valak's words didn't hit me until I saw a lone figure with an uneven gait walking down the street.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. Thank you all so much for watching. No matter where you are in the world, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening or night time, I want you to do what you love doing. Love and hugs to all you fantastic people out there, and I'll definitely see you all again very soon. Goodbye.